Good afternoon. My name is Rob Chambers. I'm the Managing Director of Total Telecom. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by Amdocs and RAD, and it is on commercializing NFV. Is vCPE the first step? I've got two speakers with me today. I have Elizabeth Bavin, who is the Solutions Marketing Manager for NGOS at Amdocs. Elizabeth's been in the industry for about 15 years, and currently she focuses on Amdocs' Open Network Partner Program with particular focus on NFV offerings. And Ilan Tevet is the Head of Service Provider Line of Business at RAD. Ilan originally joined RAD's marketing department in the late 90s as a technical support engineer, and has worked his way up through RAD's ranks since then. So welcome to you both. I'm going to hand over to you and let you go into the presentation in a second. Before that, I'd just like to say to everyone that we will answer questions at the end of the webinar. Those you can ask by typing them into the question box. We'll try and answer as many as we can. And any we don't get to within the sort of hour that we've scheduled for the webinar, we'll pass over to Ilan and Elizabeth and the teams at Amdocs and RAD to answer offline. So without further ado, Elizabeth, Ilan, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Ilan.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about RAD's history, and as Rob mentioned, I've been here for a while, almost 20 years in a couple of months from now. So RAD was established in the early 80s, 1980s that. We are in business for over 35 years. Actually, what kept us going and successful throughout such a long period of time is our focus in innovation. We are focusing on the access part of the network for all these years. And throughout this period, we have been successfully selling to Tier 1 service providers. We have more than 15 million business CPEs deployed all over the world. We are selling in all continents. About 70% of RAD business is telecom or service providers, communication service providers, mobile operators, wholesale providers. And the rest 30% is communication solutions for critical infrastructure, for utilities, government, organizations that need a very robust and solid communication solutions. So I mentioned that innovation was in our core, one of our core competencies. Just to mention the few technologies that RAD was one of the first to introduce to market. So maybe some of you know that pseudowire was one of the first companies to introduce this technology years ago. Hardware miniaturization, already 10 years ago, RAD introduced to market a system on SFPs. Smart SFPs that provide networking, communication capabilities in SFP form factor. RAD is one of the leading forces in the Care Ethernet, in the Metro Ethernet forum. And back in the early days of NFV, in 2014, RAD was the first company to introduce a commercial vCPE solution, or a distributed NFV solution. RAD is a vertically integrated organization. We combine marketing, R&D, sales, and also production with a global presence. This allows us to be very active to our customer needs. We have very close, intimate relationships with the T1 operators. We design our products based on their requirements, and we are able to adjust and react in an agile way to their evolving needs.
Great, thank you, Ilan, and it's good to be working with you. Just a little bit about Amdocs before we get into the meat of the webinar. So hopefully most of you are aware of Amdocs as a market leader in customer experience solutions. We're a large company, 3.6 billion revenues in 2015, and we're a global company. There are over 24,000 Amdocs professionals looking after 300 odd customers. across the globe in 90 countries or more. So really, based on that and the sort of number of project successes we've had over a long period of time, we've got extensive experience of delivering to telecommunications. That's our primary focus, and we have a deep understanding of our customers' business. And that means that really we can offer great value by providing best practices, insights, and solutions, all based on the experience that we've gathered from across the communications industry and of course from across the different geographies. I just want to highlight as well that actually 2016 has been a great year for us in terms of industry recognition. And you can see some of the awards we've won recently, as well as some of the comments from analysts. I just want to highlight one, really, which is the most recent one, the MEF Award, which we won for the third Network Technology Solutions Vendor of the Year. It's quite a mouthful. And that's for our NFV Service Lifecycle Management Solution, which has really been recognized by Light Reading as well, and also by Global Telecoms, as being very innovative, and we've been recognized for our thought leadership in that area. So we'll talk a bit more about that as we get on into the webinar. But actually, having sort of introduced ourselves, let's move on now and talk a bit about virtualization, which is the background to our topic today. And really just to set the scene, I think it's clear to all of us that we're in a time of transition from our kind of traditional static networks that we're all very familiar with to the software-controlled dynamic networks of the future. Or at least, we talk about the future, but actually they're becoming a reality now, aren't they? And I think views in the industry about how quickly networks are going to transform to fully virtualized networks varies very considerably. So those service providers who are really leading the charge expect networks to be predominantly virtual in, let's say, 5 years' time. AT&T, for example, are well known for saying that they're well on track for virtualizing 30% of their network this year, and 75% by 2020. And all of that driving towards making ordering much faster, simplifying network operations, and improving their total cost of ownership. I think our view at Amdocs is that much of the market may well take longer, and that probably the reality for the next decade or so is actually the hybrid network, that combination of the physical and logical with the new virtual network. And that reality, of course, brings with it some new challenges that are going to impact the service provider's ability to really achieve the kind of levels of service agility that NFV promises. So Ilan, perhaps you'd like to unpack some of those challenges for us a bit.
Sure. So indeed, the introduction of NFV SDN, and we'll talk a little bit about that further on, has a lot of promises, but there are also some challenges that service providers are facing today. IT is coming into the physical network. The way, the methods, the practices that have been developed by service providers for decades are being challenged. The simple hierarchical management scheme, BSS, OSS, network management, element management systems, and the network itself is not so simple anymore because there are additional components that are being introduced, and these components are virtual, which means that the service provider has more flexibility, but he also has less predictability and more degrees of freedom. So we are talking about new components like SDN controllers, cloud management systems, virtual network functions, and their management applications. Orchestrator, all these are new components that are being introduced. They're coming from the data center world, from the IT world into the network. And with a lot of flexibility, you have to come up eventually with a solution that also allows a way to manage this flexibility and this complexity, which means service providers are looking today for a way to combine the traditional and the new management solutions. A way to reuse older investments in creating service catalogs, for instance, while deploying the same services or new services in a virtual way. Interoperability between different DNFs that are chained and different NFVI or x86 or server infrastructure has to be taken into consideration. This is why most vendors are investing today, and we'll see later on what RAD and Amdocs are doing in that space. Most vendors are investing in pre-testing VNFs to be able to provide some guarantee on the performance level that should be expected. We'll talk also about the organizational aspects of this transition, because it's not just about technology. The organization of the service provider also has to adapt to this change. IT-related knowledge has to infiltrate into the network, into the operations, and this is a process that has to be taken into consideration. And obviously, this is something that will also take time.
Great, thank you. And I guess one of the things to say here as well is that actually when we look across the kind of physical and the virtual worlds and bringing those together, that actually complex software integration is absolutely critical to that, to managing these new network topologies, and also to optimizing the operational processes that are going to be needed across the two domains. It's worth just pausing for a moment just to think about where we are in this disruptive transformation. The process started really, I guess, from a kind of standards-led phase. If you think about Etsimano, that started back in 2012. And really, the pace of technology change around us doesn't slow down. It remains relentless. You've only got to look at kind of the transition from LTE to VoLTE to NFV and SDN and 5G. The technology is changing all the time. And standards are a very good place to start, and obviously they're part of that early focus. But of course, they're still evolving, and they don't necessarily address all of the challenges. For example, they don't resolve some of the complexity around that software integration, around integrating multiple vendor solutions, for example. Nor do they address some of the organizational challenges necessarily around, for example, how IT and network departments are going to work together going forward. And we've seen, I think, as well, a big focus on PoCs, on the technology itself, and actually testing that out through the proofs of concepts. But now I think it's generally accepted we're actually in the commercialization stage. So there are players across the industry who are now looking at how they're going to operationalize and monetize SDN and NFV. How are they going to create, deliver, assure some of these new virtual services that are going to be running across the hybrid networks. If we just look for a moment at what some of the key players in the market are doing, in 2016, we've seen several of the big players launch or at least announce commercialization of NFV in terms of putting services out there. So Telstra, for example, back in March, launched a service based on SDN and NFV technology that's going to enable business and enterprise customers to set up bandwidth on demand between data centers, their own premises, even into the public cloud, as well as provisioning virtual network appliances such as, firewalls. And according to Telstra CTO, this is really transforming Telstra from a simple carrier into a world-class agile telco technology company. So it really is it's a big change. Singtel as well have launched an NFV service which allows enterprises to replace their physical router and firewall hardware with software-based network applications, and hosted in Singtel's cloud. And it's all about delivery of flexibility, speed, cost efficiency, as you'd expect from virtualization. Orange as well announced their plans to launch a network as a service offering for multinational customers across 70 countries by the end of this year. They announced that back in July. And so, there's a lot of activity going on in the market. A recent survey showed that 81% of participants in that survey expect to deploy NFV by 2017. So it's high on everybody's priority list.
Let's talk about enterprise CPE use cases, or about value-added services. You know, today value-added services are typically provided using dedicated appliances or dedicated hardware. This means that in addition to a demarcation device that typically the service provider would locate at his enterprise customer premises, the service provider has to deploy additional boxes for additional services. These boxes have to be physically chained between them. So, you know, just imagine the clutter of such several of a scenario where you have multiple value-added services that are chained, and you know, just the logistical and operational complexities that this would mean for the service provider. But also, maybe more important, it means that it takes a very long time to introduce new capabilities into the network, new functionalities. It's a very complex process, whether it is requiring in some cases to upgrade CPE or NTU or such an appliance device. In other cases, it requires to be replaced in order to deploy a more enhanced version of that appliance, or in some cases add a new physical appliance that has to be, again, chained physically between the existing infrastructure. You know, even for new services or new applications, this has to go through a complex and long homologation certification process. It takes a really long time. Even if we're talking about existing services that were already certified by the service provider, and now you have a new customer that calls you and asks you to buy into that service, what we are hearing from service providers is that connecting such a customer takes to the new service takes between several months to sometimes even a year, because multiple technician visits typically have to be coordinated. Sometimes even multiple technicians with different expertise level have to go on site in order to take care for these complex installations. So, you know, whether it is a new service that is being introduced into the network or an existing service that is being provisioned to a new customer, these processes simply take too long today, between long weeks and long months. And this is not the way the service provider can go further anymore. So this is one of the reasons they're looking for a change. And vCPE, if we move to the next slide, there's a lot of promises. Let's see what is the idea here. So, you know, basically it's quite simple. Instead of having dedicated hardware appliances for the value-added services, the idea is to maintain the same CPE or demarcation device that is deployed by the service provider, but deploy the value-added service, for example, a firewall, in a virtual way. Actually, back in 2014, in the early days of NFV, RAD demonstrated the first commercial distributed NFV, or virtualization at the edge solution. It was part of the ETSI PoC number 4, together with Fortinet and Certes, and showed how you can maintain the operational practices, how you can maintain the service assurance provided by the network demarcation device while hosting third-party VNFs in a totally open way. Since then, RAD has been working with its Tier 1 customers to fine-tune its vCPE offering, and this year we have launched our 3rd generation vCPE product. Let's look on some of the values from customer point of view that NFV and vCPE can provide. So, Service providers are looking for looking at VCP as one of the earliest or most immediate, most lucrative use cases for NFV. Part of the reason is that, as I showed before, this area of the access of the customer premise suffers from a lack of flexibility and very high cost, unacceptable time to deploy services. But maybe the other side of that is that vCPE also provides a way to deploy NFV while not modifying anything at the core of the network. So it is also perceived by service providers as a lower risk way to make their networks more agile and more profitable. There are many values and many benefits for the customer by deploying a vCPE. If we look at some of them, so definitely scalability and flexibility, automation and programmability of services. Some of our service provider customers are looking at unique and innovative ways to market these value-added services. For example, to offer a try and buy to their customers, to their enterprise customers. End customer can activate a service through a self-care portal, try it for a couple of weeks, and if he's happy, he will be billed on that service. If he's not happy, he can just simply commission himself that particular service. So we're talking about a way to expedite time to revenues, to allow customer self-care, to reduce the vendor lock-in, because it's rather simple to deploy a specific VNF or a different VNF that provides a similar functionality. These VNFs run on or can run on any x86 blade. And of course, at the end of the day, there has to be a service lifecycle management solution, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, because this is one of the strong values that Amdocs brings into the picture.
Great, thanks, Ilan. And I guess when we're talking about value, we're in a technology industry, aren't we? And of course, we love new technology. But of course, the first question that any CFO and his team are going to ask when they're faced with a request for any kind of investment in the network is, what about the business case? Where is the value in financial terms? And our experiences working with many tier 1 service providers around the globe is that many of them are asking themselves this very question. Where is the business case for vCPE? As Ilan's pointed out, it is an area in the network that isn't in the core, so potentially network change carries less risk, but nevertheless there needs to be a very clear financial case for that. And as a result of that, and the experience of hearing this question from our customers, we actually took on the challenge to see if we could help understand the business case of vCPE, and actually to gain some insight into how to go about monetizing end-to-end services based on NFV and SDN. And we worked with the research firm Analysys Mason, with them providing the business modeling expertise and Amdocs providing technical input through our NFV group. And we looked at 2 business cases with them. We looked at enterprise vCPE and residential vCPE, but I'm going to focus on the enterprise today. And results, in fact, were really very significant, particularly in the enterprise market, because margins there are, of course, much higher than they are in the residential mass market. Analysys Mason built a very comprehensive model which covered some of the key business processes, which you can see on the left there, so trouble to resolve, order to cash, and CPU supply management. And they also looked at revenue streams and the potential that vCPE could have around new revenue streams. In terms of getting data, the work was based on a series of interviews carried out with 20 service providers, mostly in Europe and North America. So that, of course, has a bearing on the results of the business case. And it aimed really to look at their current processes, to look at their costs, their ways of doing business, and how that would change as a result of introducing virtual customer premises equipment. On this slide, you can see a kind of high-level view of the business case, which had very clear revenue and operational benefits. So the model was over a 5-year period, and it's clear from the results that being first to market, being first to implement a program of vCPE rollout to an enterprise customer base can drive a 5% point uplift in revenue every year. And for this particular business case and these particular service provider sizes and types, this culminated in something like 1.4 billion of new revenues over 5 years, so very significant indeed. And that's through additional services that can be delivered over the virtual equipment that's been installed, and also the ability for service providers to easily cross-sell and upsell NFV and SDN-enabled networking services, like things like self-service bandwidth on demand, for example, or security as a service. So that's the revenue side. Cost savings are very significant too, across supply management, order to cash, and trouble to resolve. And the predicted cost saving per site is 47%, and that's through being able to eliminate complex manual service delivery processes like configuration and provisioning, CPE, installation and replacement, NOC support, and of course some elimination of truck rolls of actually having to go to site to either to sort out and resolve issues. And the bottom line is that the business case shows that for a service provider rolling out 110,000 enterprise sites, that the payback on investment is around 3 years, just over 3 years in fact. And the model also looks at what does it mean for smaller service providers. And in fact, for a service provider with, let's say, 50,000 enterprise sites, which is much smaller, still, although the numbers will of course change significantly, the key metrics, NPV and payback, are actually exactly the same across the scale of very large and much smaller service providers. So that's the business case, and of course if you're interested in that particularly and you'd like more detail on that, then at the end I'll be sharing with you where you can actually download the detail of the business case. So Ilan, let's have a look at some of the approaches to deploying vCPE.
Yeah. So basically there are two predominant approaches to vCPE. First is a centralized approach where VNFs are installed, instantiated somewhere in the network or in the cloud. This is what we see here at the top. In this case, the service provider still would need some kind of a CPE. You may see in some places the term PCP or physical CPE being used. This device provides basically two functions. The first is to act as a physical demarcation between the customer network and the service provider network. Maybe more important, this device also opens a tunnel across the network, across any type of access network, towards the data center where the specific value-added services or the specific VNFs are installed and running, so that the physical CPE acts like a remote port of that particular instance of the VNF running in the data center. A decentralized approach actually deploys the virtual functions at the enterprise customer location or premise. In this case, some customers would call it a UCPE, like a universal CPE, or a hybrid CPE. It's a way to deploy VNFs at the edge of the network. And actually, from our experience, we see that different customers have different focus areas or different deployment modes they would like to start with. Some of them start with a centralized approach. Others start with a decentralized approach. There are some fundamental differences between them. For example, the decentralized approach is relatively lean in terms of infrastructure investment that has to be done. You don't need to deploy large scale distributed data centers before you have the first customer. You can go with the UCP or a hybrid device and deploy them only on specific cases where you're actually successful in selling this kind of offering to specific enterprise customers. On the other hand, the centralized approach has, of course, economy of scale benefits, but requires more investment from day one. So what we're seeing is that some customers are saying, you know what, I want to go first with one approach, or for some services, for example, security-related value-added services like firewall or encryption, those kind of services, it makes sense to virtualize at the edge of the network, because otherwise it will be very tough to sell. You know, if you run these kind of services somewhere else in the network, you don't really protect, or it is perceived as less protection of the customer data. While for other services or other type of customers, they would prefer to go with a more of a centralized approach.
Great, thanks. And I guess, Ilan, it's not a case of either or, but actually of optimizing the use of both approaches.
Precisely. And I think it's all about flexibility. Flexibility to meet different types of services offered by the same service provider, and be able to offer a solution that can fit the roadmap and the rollout plans of different service providers at a point in time.
So thanks, Ilan. That's great. Now, we're going to move on now and talk a little bit about the Amdocs and RAD solution. But I think just to kick that off, it's worth highlighting, why choose to work with Amdocs and RAD. And I think hopefully it's clear that this solution brings together two industry-leading players with excellent track records in terms of technology and delivery and customer base, and both companies with very strong relationships with tier one operators, and with portfolio synergies. So together we can offer a very strong solution. I think one of the key things about that solution is that it's pre-integrated, automated, and programmable. And I think pre-integrated in particular is very key, because what we're doing here is trying to take some of the pain away from the service provider. There's a lot of complexity and work involved in integrating different software and systems, and so that resolves some of those issues up front. And also, I think it's fair to say that we share a vision for the flexibility that NFV can bring, but also in maintaining an open approach. So both parties have extensive partner programs. We're open to any VNF from any vendor for any network, if you like. So we share that vision. Is there anything you want to add there, Ilan?
No, I think you covered it well. Maybe the point of ecosystems is worth discussing a little bit further. We're talking about a new world where openness of the solution is key. From one hand, and the ability to provide predictable performance from the other end is also very important. So I believe Amdocs, and this is also true for RAD, are investing quite a lot in integrating and certifying different VNF to provide this kind of predictability, predictable and pre-integrated solution to its customers.
Excellent, thank you. So let's unpack the solution a little bit more.
Yeah. So the solution includes three solution areas. On the top in light blue, we can see the Amdocs components. Amdocs obviously is coming from the BSS, OSS side, which means that Amdocs has a vast experience deploying carrier-grade, mission-critical communication software solutions. As a leading communication product catalog and service fulfillment, Amdocs has an holistic approach that is required in order to deploy these kind of solutions that combine the physical world, the traditional world, with the evolving new world of virtual network functions. RAD is the access leader. Is the first company who launched a vCPE solution more than 3 years ago. Currently, we have the third generation product available. Our solution includes an element management system called RADView, the RAD CPEs, which combine physical network functions or PNFs, functions like MF 2.0 certified demarcation, wire speed 1 gig router, performance assurance PNFs. These capabilities are embedded in our FPGA hardware and can be activated on demand by customer upon a need. We also provide, of course, the NFVI or the x86, the compute resource that is integrated. It's modular and is integrated into our CPEs. We have some of our own VNFs, some VNFs that are customized applications that we develop, but mostly we invest in certifying third-party VNFs to provide customers with a predictable service. As you can see here, the Amdocs orchestration solution, the NFVO, and the VNF manager, which includes all the Amdocs know-how, the product catalog, the service fulfillment, is integrated into the ability to deploy the VNFs, to chain them, and to activate an end-to-end solution. Let's look a little bit more, let's slightly deep dive into the RAD part of the solution. So RAD offers vCPE for any implementation mode, whether it is centralized or decentralized. Basically, if it is centralized, it does not have a compute, does not have an NFVI. If it is decentralized, then it does, in order to be able to host third-party VNFs. Our solution includes what we call any access. So RAD as the access leader supports different access interfaces for our vCPE solution, of course Ethernet, but also DSL, PDH, GPON, LTE. One of our Tier 1 operators in North America mentioned to me the other day that when they are looking at their target customer base for vCPE, they realize that about 25% of the locations simply do not have fiber. So in order to be able to reach all these customers, they must have a solution that includes this flexibility, not just fiber, but also MLPPP, for instance, DSL, VDSL2, GPON, LTE, and what have you. Our solution also includes pluggable PNF, and here I want to take you back in time a little bit. More than 10 years ago, RAD launched and was the innovator of what we called at the time system on SFPs. basically the ability to have a full-featured networking device in an SFP form factor. We now call them in the vCPE world pluggable PNFs. These are rather cool pluggable devices that can be hosted in any switch, router, or a white box to add capabilities that are simply not there. For example, layer 2 demarcation, we have the only CE 2.0 certified NID in an SFP form factor. We have a timing synchronization SFP. We have a TDM SFPs that allow to provision TDM service or to backhaul over existing TDM list lines. All this in SFPs. Of course, the ability to host any third-party VNF. We are totally open in that. And as I said, we can provide performance indication on what customers can expect for different types of RAD NFVI or x86 options. Basically, our solution combines the freedom of choice for deploying any VNF while maintaining the demarcation function, whether it is layer 2, carrier Ethernet, MEF services, also layer 3 end-to-end performance monitoring with an open NFV SDN architecture to facilitate integration into third-party SDN controllers or orchestrators. And in that regard, I want to mention, I didn't have time to update the slide, unfortunately, but a few days ago, during the F16 event in Baltimore, RAD was selected as one of the best in show PoCs. We have demonstrated an integrated solution with one of the orchestrator leading vendors. So if I have to recap on RAD capabilities, any vCPE deployment mode, whether it is PCP, UCP, or White Box Plus. White Box Plus is our innovative idea that allows service providers to activate specific PNFs, which are actually pre-installed in their in our UCP. They can activate specific functions like layer 2 demarcation or layer 3 wire speed router in order to free up CPU resources or to get better performance for specific value-added services. We support hardware-based wire speed packet forwarding and performance monitoring, allowing to maintain reliable and consistent traffic management while virtualizing value-added services. Open and standard architecture. Pluggable x86 server blades. This is a very interesting point because, you know, the IT world is evolving in terms of performance capabilities quite faster than the telecom world. So customers are telling us that they expect to upgrade the server blades more frequently than they upgrade the networking capabilities, because they will need to host more VNF, so they will need to get better performance from the VNF. So modularity is a key value here. As part of our DNFV Alliance, we test a wide range of market leader VNFs. We'll see some examples in the following slides. And as I said before, we were there from the early days. It's strange to think about to speak about something that was only 3 years ago as the early days, but you know, this world of NFV and SDN is evolving so fast that 3 years is really a lot. This year we have released our 3rd generation vCPE product, which is already commercially available, and we are engaged with a few dozens of customers at different stages.
And thanks, Ilan. And from an Amdocs perspective, this is a view of our award-winning NFV service lifecycle management solution, it's an end-to-end solution. It's fully integrated with the master catalog, with BSS, and with the network, so that you get true end-to-end from the order right the way through to ensuring that these new services are monetized, so that the service provider can be sure that everything that is delivered actually is going to appear on the bill. And there are, I guess, three key aspects to this solution. And actually, it starts even before you get to the orchestration piece, to the fulfillment piece, and that's with the question of actually onboarding VNFs at the beginning, doing the configuration, deciding on the policies, defining the workflow, and actually chaining those VNFs together to create services, and in fact, potentially designing services that incorporate both VNFs and some of the physical elements, like the VPN, for example, for enterprise services. So that's a really important stage, which typically is taking service providers months. I mean, we hear 9 months or even more to create a new service. And in the past, really for the past even 25 years, it's not unusual for service providers to say, actually, when it comes down to it, fundamentally, we only have 4 services. Of course, the way those are combined, the way that they're billed, the way that they're offered is very variable. But with NFV comes the potential to actually introduce large numbers of very innovative services. But those need to be brought to market very quickly, both to compete with some of the very new players in the market, like the Googles of this world, but also in order to reduce some of the risk around innovation. The longer it takes you and the more costly it is to bring new services to market, then of course the higher the risk that's associated with innovation. So our offline design and onboarding capacity that also incorporates test and debug using our NFV orchestration solution really addresses that question of how to do rapid, low-risk, low-cost innovation. And that's integrated with the NFV orchestration solution at the heart of it all, which is responsible for the continuous real-time fulfillment. And even beyond fulfillment, actually, with the sort of dynamic nature of virtual networks, actually the boundaries between assurance and fulfillment become more blurred, and that kind of closed loop fulfillment becomes very important. And the other aspect that really helps to ensure real-time operations is the ability to look at active inventory, to actually take a snapshot in near real time of what's happening in the network, and also to be able to compare that to a historic view of the network, to be able to see exactly what's changed. And that, again, really is all about assurance, is supporting the operation of these services. Because once they're introduced, if you can speed that up considerably and cut that time, take it from months to just weeks, and then you can fulfill them, in a sense, your problems are only just starting. And actually, the key to this is being able to operate those services to ensure security, to ensure quality of service, and having visibility of both the network resources and the services running over them in near real time is a very important part of that. If we look at some of the key capabilities, then automating that early stage of onboarding VNFs, certifying them, manage them is critical. And then that carries on through to the service development, being able to do automated design, test, and creative services with or without service chaining, and catalog driven, so that once you've designed a new service, you push it straight through to your catalog, and it's then available to other systems in your stack. The orchestration piece needs to be highly dynamic. It needs to be open to ensure that you've got vendor neutrality, that you can choose to onboard and use that whole plethora of VNFs that are now available. almost to eventually get to a point a bit like with your smartphone, where you've got endless applications you can download, and that is the road that's open for VNFs, provided you can both onboard them and orchestrate them once they're turned into services. We've talked a bit about the need for the active near real-time inventory, and the Amdocs solution also has service stream management, which ensures that you have full visibility end-to-end of virtual and physical services and the underlying network resources. And I think one of the key value adds really for Amdocs as well is that we're drawing on our expertise, our experience, our solutions in BSS and OSS, so that we can really deliver true end-to-end service lifecycle management, and including in that the potential of pre-integration with ordering, with billing, and even with a customer self-service portal. And of course also integration with our customers like RAD, so that we're delivering best-of-breed solutions that interact openly, that are seamlessly integrated, and can fulfill any number of NFV use cases. And I think the final thing to say is that we also have a set of managed services and system integration offerings around NFV to support service providers in transformation, in operations, in testing, and in assurance. We'll move on and have a look at a use case. And Ilan, I'll let you introduce that.
So we're doing a little bit more deep dive, more details here, but we don't have too much time, so let me just talk about the essence of what we are seeing here. So one of the key points is the fact that Amdocs provide end-to-end from the data center at the right here through the customer premise at the left, end-to-end orchestration solution. A pre-integrated BSS, OSS, NFV orchestration that allows to streamline the deployment of new services and expedite monetization. A solution that can fit different vCPE deployment modes, whether it is a centralized solution where VNFs are running at the data center, or decentralized where the value-added services, the VNFs, reside at the customer prem. Both these scenarios can be supported by the same architecture. One of the interesting points to note here is that I mentioned the issue of pre-testing VNFs and integration of PNFs and service catalogs. Some of these companies, like Fortinet, Juniper, Riverbed, you will see both in the Amdocs ecosystem and in the RAD ecosystem. And this brings a lot of value to the service provider, because it can deploy a VNF that is pre-tested on the RAD vCPE on one hand, with predictable performance, and on the other hand is integrated into Amdocs end-to-end BSS or OSS solution that allows to actually provision it and monetize it very quickly.
Great, thank you, Ilan. And just in thinking about time, we'll move on and just really in terms of think a little bit about business value in terms of what Amdocs and RAD together are bringing with an end-to-end vCPE solution. I think that the fact that the solution is pre-integrated is obviously very key in terms of reducing cost and also risk of building virtual network and of adopting these vCPE services. Also, the solution delivers very streamlined operations, so zero-touch fulfillment, and with support for some existing interfaces that service providers may have, as well as common virtual infrastructure across really any scale of business and any combination of branches. I think in terms of value, the two extensive ecosystems of NFV and VNF partners really can help service providers to ensure that they get all the benefits from vendor neutrality, from openness, from choice. it's worth saying as well, probably, that Amdocs and RAD, we are already engaging with service providers around the solution. We have joint engagements with a couple of Tier 1 carrier opportunities in progress at the moment. Anything else you want to highlight there, Ilan? Well, we'll move on and just finish by summarizing, really, and in a sense drawing on the lessons that I think both companies have learned from any number of PoCs and customer engagements and some of the live projects that are already underway, and also thinking about the demo that we did at Mobile World Congress last year with Vodafone and with a number of partners, where really we were able to understand what was required. The POC actually was completed in 7 weeks. So looking at one of the points here, we realized from that POC that defining VNF policies is absolutely essential. It's very complex, it's very time consuming, but it's an absolutely essential part of the process. And it was clear that of those 7 weeks, 80% of the time was taken up with VNF onboarding and with defining policies. And of course the question remains, how long would it have taken without automation around the VNF onboarding and service design? We talked a bit about standards right at the beginning, and of course they do provide an excellent starting point, but they don't resolve all of the complexity, and particularly not the complexity around integrating multiple vendor solutions. And that's where partnership is really critical, I think. We talked a bit as well in terms... Sorry, Ilan, go on.
Yeah, I think we've seen that many customers are eager to learn how to adapt their existing infrastructure to this virtual world. They have networks. These networks are provisioned, configured in a certain way today. They want to virtualize some components, but it's not that you can really bring in data center completely into the network today. This is maybe in the future. So we're talking about a process that will take time. And one of the challenges is how to evolve the existing reality into a more agile, flexible, virtualized offering. And it's not just about technology. This kind of evolution requires, in many cases, a different knowledge, different expertise. IT know-how in the network is something that service providers have to invest to have, organizations have to adapt, and this is something that takes time, and service providers that will be successful are those that will realize this fact and will devote management attention also to these soft aspects of the evolution.
Yes, and I think as well we talked at the beginning about some of the challenges, and certainly networks and services are becoming increasingly complex with the introduction of NFV and SDN. There are very complex relationships between the customers, the services, and the physical and virtual network resources. And so that real-time visibility of relationships is really critical in terms of tracking dynamic network and dynamic services, in terms of being able to actually support continuous fulfillment and assurance, and also in providing the historic view alongside the real-time view to enable fault resolution. And I guess, I'm from Amdocs, I would say, wouldn't I, don't overlook the importance of BSS, but I think the integration with BSS is absolutely critical in terms of monetizing NFV. It's not just about the technology, it's all about the service at the end of the day. And so that kind of top-down service-centric approach is very key. I think perhaps we should finish there and just see if we've got a minute or two for questions. You can see on the screen here there's a lot of additional information available to you, both from RAD around their vCPE solution and also around the Amdocs NFV service lifecycle management solution. There are links here that can be shared with you so that you can download some of our white papers and videos, and also visit some of our websites to gain more information. Or, of course, feel free to contact Ilan or myself if you'd like more information. But I think, have we got a moment, Rob, just to see if there are any questions?
Elizabeth, Ilan, thank you very much for that. It's been very informative. Yeah, we are sort of up against it a little bit, but we have got a few questions coming. So let's try and whistle through a couple of them in sort of no particular order. One which seems like a fairly easy one for you guys to answer. I'm sure it's probably an easy one to answer. Someone's asked, is the Amdocs RAD service available in India as well?
Yes, it's available globally.
That's what I thought the answer would be, but I thought I'd pick an easy one. What else have we got here? So, what else have we got here? Then there's also a question here. And this is from a gentleman called Bob Monkman. Are low latency and quality of experience the key drivers for hybrid vCPE with NFVs deployed at the customer edge? I think that's for either of you, really. I haven't been directed to either of you.
So I think the whole idea is not to lose customer experience, quality of experience, while evolving some of the services, some of the value-added services to virtualized ones. So be able to continue guaranteeing, assuring the access part of the network, whether it is a layer 2 access service or layer 3 VPN, and on the other hand, enjoy the benefit of virtualizing some of the value-added services on top of that infrastructure.
Okay, great. No, thanks for that. Now, also, I've got another question here. Someone's asked, I think on one of your earlier slides, slide 15, you refer to the VIM. Who's the provider of the VIM for your solution? Is that something you can answer?
Just going back to slide 15 so that we can see what we're looking at.
Okay, we've got the box down in the bottom right-hand corner. I think that's what we're talking about there. So it's a third party.
Yes.
Or could it be anyone?
So there could be a number of options there, I think, is the answer to that.
Okay, all right. We've got quite a few more questions here, which I think are probably going to be sort of similar and quite specific, so maybe we'll try and stay off those. I think a couple of things are sort of more generic here. One here that might be quite interesting is what's, for both of you really, what's the main take on the challenges that operators are facing as they move into network virtualization and vCPE services? Is there a quick answer to that?
Well, I think from my perspective, I think what I would highlight really is the reality of dealing with the hybrid world, at least for some while to come. And I think, the complexity that brings, and therefore, you're bringing together existing systems with new systems, and having, you want to have an integrated solution that's going to manage some of that complexity for you. Otherwise, costs go up, the time to do anything, to make changes, obviously goes up, and all those kind of good benefits of NFV around agility are potentially lost. So I think complexity is certainly one of the key challenges.
Okay, and Ilan, anything you want to add into that?
Yeah, I think that, as we mentioned in one of the earlier slides, NFV brings the flexibility, agility, and the ability for the end customer to do self-care. But all this has to be managed in a way that, while increasing flexibility and agility, will maintain the user experience. And, we are increasing the level of freedom. We are moving from dedicated appliances to software-based value-added services. And it's very important to be able to guarantee the performance of these services during this transition.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah. Now, I think that a lot of the questions we've got here are sort of similar in their vein. So as we're sort of well over the time at the moment, what I'd suggest is perhaps that we'll forward these on to you both afterwards so that you can answer these questions for people. But maybe just the most useful thing just to wrap up would be have a quick feedback of where you can get some further information on this kind of solution. I think you've probably both said it before, but are we talking about the links that are on the slides here, or is there anything else that people can read?
So I think from my perspective, there's a number of places you can go. There's Amdocs.com, of course, and there's a lot of information available there. We also have a partner website, AmdocsNFVpartners.com, which is on the slide. So if you're interested in more detail about the partner program, you can go there. There's also, you can download the business case from Amdocs.com, and you can also, there's a new white paper out which talks about our approach to NFV service lifecycle management, and again, there's a link available to that. And of course, feel free to contact me if you want any more information.
That sounds great. And Ilan, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think the links here would be most relevant and recent ones. And of course, feel free to drop me an email. It will be a pleasure to engage and share our vision and have a more detailed discussion.
You know what, that sounds like a very good place to wrap it up. So what I'd suggest we do is, as I say, we'll take the other questions that we've got here offline. Today, I think it just remains for me to thank you, Elizabeth, and you, Ilan, for your input today, and thank everyone who's attended the webinar today for coming along and listening to this Total Telecom webinar. We will be putting a recording of it out so that people who were here can listen to it again, and those who weren't can listen to it. And so thank you for participating. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.